Andrea, could you mute your mic for me, please?
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here at the Ohio State University National Student Parent Symposium. My name is Lark Lowe Sontag. I am the campus coordinator at Bergen Community College in New Jersey. And I'm so excited to be here. I'm so happy that you guys are all here. I hope that this is an informative workshop / talk on TANF, uh, temporary assistance for needy families. So with that, I am going to share my screen. All right. So parenting students benefit from a more equitable TANF. Keep in mind, I do use the term student parents occasionally in this presentation, but I will try to correct myself to honor the parenting duties that students, students who have children have, and I respect that. We're going to start off first with a Jamboard. And let's go here. I'm gonna ask you your thoughts on TANF, welfare, and just let me know. The link is going to be shared in the chat. All right. So you got it? Does everybody have the link to the Jamboard? Okay. So I'm going to show you guys. Here you go. See, this is a Jamboard. You guys can see that screen, correct? Okay. A Jamboard is kind of an interactive board. And so how to use this board is, you see this little sticky note right here? You click on here and you can put down your thoughts. What is TANF? What are your thoughts on TANF? Do you know what it is? I can put down, I know it's temporary assistance for needy families. And I put my name, Lark, and then I save it. There you go. So if you guys can, just put your thoughts on there so you can kind of like save it and capture that. If you can make it bigger or smaller, whatever you would like to do. I'll give everybody a little some time to do that. Okay, cash assistance, help for needy families if necessary, Chaz, okay. Great, great. Thank you guys all for sharing. I'll give you like 2 more minutes. Mm-hmm. Can you wrap it up in like 30 seconds? Okay, that's great. And just so you know, we're going to be using this Jamboard throughout the session. Oh, shoot, there's still people putting the questions up. Let me give you guys some time. Cal works. I'm from Los Angeles. Hello, California. Small money with lots of bureaucracy, but a lifetime for some, Teresa. Some post-secondary grants. I'm gonna make this bigger. Amanda. All right. Thank you guys all for sharing. Just so you know, here the second Jamboard is solutions to make TANF more equitable, and we also have questions and comments. So if I'm talking during this time and you want me to get back in contact with you later, just feel free to go to the third Jamboard and put whatever comments and things that you would like. Okay. So thank you guys all for sharing your thoughts on TANF. So before we get started with this presentation, so we can see where we all are. All right, and presentation. All right, so where we're going to start. Oh, resend the link. Okay. Thank you so much, Jessica. Jessica's going to be helping me with this presentation. So the history of childcare. Past caring, a history of preschool care education from 1820 to 1964. Just so you guys know, that's a white paper. And it is, if you have children, if you're in education, if you're in childcare, preschool, this is a really important paper, and make sure for you to look it up, and I'll give you information on that after this presentation. The difference between preschool and childcare are much deeper than the amount of time spent there and location. The differences are rooted in race, social economic class, and gender. During the 19th and 20th century, 2 tiers of early childhood programs evolved in the United States. One tier is rooted in the social welfare system that was driven by a desire to reduce welfare payments with little attention paid to the needs of the children. The system of custodial group childcare are for low-income families. Low-income families was in sharp contrast to the second tier of childcare rooted in an education system that provided preschool education mainly for children of the middle and upper classes. And this is from Judith E. Jones for the preface of Past Caring, A History of Preschool by Emily D. Cahan. The current view is that the difference between childcare and preschool is slowly being erased by professionalization of the field via policy. The childcare model of early childhood, largely in urban areas where Black and Latinx women make a median wage of $20,000, is thought to be the only part of the field that requires work. Preschool teachers, largely white and paid a sliver more of $28,000. Those are both horrible, horrible. Will lead the reformation as they have standards. The act of racism that created the 2 tiers will not be addressed. Racism in early childhood institution is not addressed from the lens of the history of the field. The sexism outside the field that keeps the almost affluent learning centers white and the teachers under income, because even white teachers in early childhood and childcare make small amounts of money, is also never discussed. In fact, I often meet people who apologize for making slightly more, but we all are, a lot of the field is just underpaid. And when we see racism within the institutional childhood of the US, we have to understand that it was not a side effect. The education that we have wasn't a passive consequence of racist and classist policies. The creation of a joyful experience with play and love of learning, not education, there's a difference, for affluent, predominantly white children, and the warehousing and work housing of the working class children in urban areas that have large populations of Latinx, African-American children, and the southern states where most African-Americans live have been active and deliberate. Both sides of the field are woefully understaffed, underfunded, but for different reasons. Preschool is underfunded owing to sexism. Rosie the Riveter was sent home to take care of the children, and childcare is underfunded owing to racism. Misogyny demands that white women are primary caregivers and that those women should not be working outside the home, and their children are the future. Those children belong to, the upper classes of society. And racism demands that Black and Latino women to be the help of affluent men and women who are often white. Their children are the future cogs of the machine of manual labor and service. And the standards instituted in their learning centers are services and manual labor work standards. There is nothing wrong with manual labor and there's nothing wrong with service jobs, but there is something wrong when that's the only path you're allowed. Of course, there are poor white people, just as there are affluent Black people. Still, these are the narratives and the propaganda that is used to continue to underfund learning communities and underpay the workers in institutions of early childhood education, some called childcare and others called preschool. The history of white women and Black, Indigenous, and people of color in education, and the white women's fight for access, and Black, Latinx, API, and Native Americans people's fight for access. And the reason, and keep this in mind, that white is a social construct. So at the turn of the century, if you were Italian American, if you were Irish American, you weren't necessarily viewed as white. And so your children were also possibly warehoused in these certain kinds of education systems, or warehousing for children section. And so that's the only reason I'm using that, because it's like we have to understand the various fights that people have to go through, because we're oppressed, but we're oppressed in different ways, and we have to be very clear of what is, you know, what happened to each of us. White women in education in 1862, the federal government made its first major investment in higher ed through the first Morrill Act, which granted federal land to each state for the explicit purpose of funding the creation of public colleges. As these public institutions opened, especially in the new Western states, the majority accepted women from the start. Of the 34 new public institutions founded between 1861 and 1880, 71% accepted women. Now keep in mind, I am referring to white women. The decision to accept women at public institutions was driven by a range of practical concerns. For one thing, sparsely settled Western states found it cost-effective to found co-ed schools. Sex-segregated institutions were expensive. For another, the spread of public and primary secondary schools across the country required an army of teachers, and the nation turned to women to fill those roles. These women in turn need to be trained to teach high school, and regardless of the reasons, by 1880, 1/3 of all American students enrolled in higher education were women, a percentage that was unparalleled anywhere else in the world. This was kind of like, wow, in the United States, you can come and you can become educated. The accessibility of higher education instituted for women not only helped train teachers, but also helped to seed a revolution in gender roles and progressive movements of the 19th and 20th century. Early women college graduates did not have many career paths open to them. Indeed, many of them went on to become homemakers, but their time in college fostered a commitment to public life that encouraged them to take up voluntary activism in their communities. These new graduates invented new public roles for themselves. Young, educated women founded settlement houses that offered educational services in urban immigrant communities, and early public education projects such as the Lillian Ward Visiting Nurse Association. In the years following the Civil War, the desire to educate women to be teachers was also creating a new opportunity for Black women. Spelman College was founded in Atlanta in 1881 to train African-American women to be teachers in their community. Black women who graduated from college were more likely to hold paying jobs than their white counterparts. Where white women were privileged enough to attend college in these years were likely ultimately were to be married and had husbands that could support them at home, and Black women were likely to contribute to their family's income, owing to economic discrimination that their husbands faced. Even with these extra demands and time, they went on to found things like the NAACP, like Mary Church Terrell founded, who graduated from Oberlin College in 1884. And here's something that's really interesting. We often kind of view it as, oh, well, white women had the privilege to stay at home. But keep this in mind. You're a young woman and you have educated yourself in maybe physics or biology or art. And the fact that you could not get another job, you couldn't use that skill, was very hard for people. Regardless of, people might think, oh, it's a privilege that you got to stay home. Maybe not for everybody. For some people, yes. And conversely, there were some Black women who maybe wanted to stay home with their children, but owing to de facto policies, were not allowed to. There were places where Black women were not allowed to not work outside the home. They had to work outside the home. It was a requirement. So, we're all oppressed differently. So this is also kind of shows, this also is going to go into the TANF and welfare and women. So we're just going a little bit into the history. Okay. All right. The history of welfare in the United States. President Theodore Roosevelt stated in 1911, and I'm sorry if I'm looking both screens because I have two screens. President Theodore Roosevelt in 1911 stated, surely poverty alone shouldn't disrupt the home, in reference to continuing the mother's pension that was instituted in 1890. Of course, he was only referring to white women. From 1890, the mother's pension, to the New Deal of 1935, aid to dependent children, known as ADC, and up until the 1960s, white women were given benefits to care for their children with no work requirements. This was viewed as the most humane way to support families. Both the mother's pension and ADC were, for the most part, white-only benefit programs. They were provided for white women who were widows. This was like after, in 1890, after the Civil War, people's husbands had died, or whose husbands were unable to work. So that's kind of a market different. Your husband could be in the home, a man could be in the home, and you could still get benefits. It was thought by our society's leaders that white children need to have individual one-on-one attention. It was the most developmentally appropriate option for white children. The alternate institutionalized child care centers in urban centers were not appropriate for white children. Now keep in mind, as I said, race is a social construct. These institutional child care centers, if you came over in the turn of the century and you were not English speaking, and possibly you were Italian American or Irish American, or you came from Russia, you would also be your children would probably also be in these institutional child care centers in the urban centers, okay? Because it's all about what your society views you as. It's not like, oh, see this little, this little owl is an owl, no matter where you go, it's an object. But things like race can change depending on where you are. So anyway, Black women were supposed to work. They worked through all the wars, and they worked through the pandemic of, the 1918 pandemic. Black women have always had the highest level of labor participation, and this is still the case today. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And this act also forbade discrimination on the basis of sex and race in hiring, promotion, firing, and getting benefits. The National Welfare Rights Organization, which I think is really, you should really look that up, was founded in 1966 by Dr. George Wiley. Wiley was a chemist and tenured faculty at Syracuse University and former associate director of the Congress of Racial Equality, which a lot of us know as CORE. Welfare was not open widely to Black women, Puerto Rican women, until after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The WRO merged with Miss Johnny Tillman, who is a wonderful woman. You should look her up. Her organization, AIDS to Needy Mothers Anonymous, was founded in 1963. ANC was one of the first grassroots welfare mothers organization. Tillman wrote in 1972 in Miss Magazine, "Welfare is a woman's issue," which stated that women needed a just income, whether they worked outside the home are exclusively inside the home, raising their children. When welfare became widely available for Black women, the name changed to Aid to Dependent Children, from Aid to Dependent Children to Aid to Families with Dependent Children, AFDC. So many acronyms. So the dehumanization became institutionalized and systematic. As African Americans gained civil rights and more Black women could access welfare, various states put forth punitive laws to reduce recipients, and informal rules were formalized. The amount of benefits dropped, first in 1961 and then again in 1963. Between 1970 and 1994, benefits dropped by 47% when adjusted for inflation. The notable exception being in New York, where NWRO's New York chapter was excellent at organizing and getting buy-in for MWRO, the Minimum Standards Campaign for furniture, clothing. The New York WRO chapter organized efforts and increased New York City welfare payments over 30-fold, from 1.2 million in 1963 to 40 million in 1968. These payments went directly into the pockets of women taking care of their families. But the success of NWRO in New York had its benefits and its drawbacks. But as you see, organizing can make a difference. But politicians and journalists began regularly portraying Black women as the welfare cheat. Owing to the history of slavery, society viewed Black women as laborers and not mothers. This shaped policy. Black women raising their children was viewed as Black women cheating the country and not providing cheap, exploitable labor. America never extended the empathy for white women who were unmarried to unmarried Black mothers. In 1960, Louisiana dropped 25% of their families off the welfare rolls. That's 22,000 people, adding a suitable home clause. If you had a child out of wedlock, your home was no longer suitable. Of course, the courts retroactively actually dropped that because it violated the 14th Amendment of due process. Congress created TANF, the block grant through the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996 as part of a federal effort to end welfare as we know it. TANF replaced AFDC, which had provided cash assistance to families with children in poverty since 1935. Under TANF, the federal government provided a block grant to the states, which uses the funds to operate their own programs. In order to receive federal funds, states must also spend some of their own dollars on programs for needy families as defined by the state, and they face severe penalties if they do not. This state spending requirement, known as maintenance of effort requirement, replaced the state match that the AFDC requires. States can use TANF and state MOE dollars to meet any of the 4 goals set by the 1996 law. And just kind of like these goals are amazing. 1, assisting needy families so children can be cared for in their own homes or their homes of relatives, which is fine. 2, reducing the dependency of needy parents by promoting job, preparation, work, and marriage. Kind of like, are we dictating people's personal life? Preventing pregnancies among unmarried persons. And 4, encouraging the formation and maintenance of 2-parent families. Racism towards Black women is embedded in TANF design. The program's strict work requirements and behavior requirements and arbitrary time limits, which disproportionately cut off Black families, as well as Indigenous families and Latinx families and other families of color, reflected inaccurate racist stereotypes of Black women as welfare queens who had children just to receive assistance and need to be forced to work. TANF, the federal government block grants and the state MOE contributions are the primary source of funding for state TANF programs. The basic TANF block grant has been set at $16.5 billion each year since 1996. As a result, the real value has fallen by 40% due to inflation. So that's on top of the 47%. As noted, states must spend state funds on programs for needy families as a condition of receiving the full federal TANF block grant. The amount states is set on 80% of their 1994 contributions to the AFDC related programs. In 2019, states spent $15 billion in MOE funds. The amount states are required to spend in 2019 is half of the amount they spend on AFD related programs in 1994 after adjusting for inflation. Because TANF goals are so broad, states have used their TANF funds for a variety of services and supports, including income assistance, including wage supplements for working poor families, childcare, education and job training, transportation aids to children. Transportation, states can use TANF funds beyond the core areas of providing a safety net and connecting families to work. Some states use substantial share for funding for these services and programs, some of which families that are not low income. Resources that states have shifted away from basic assistance aren't available to serve more families in need or to reinvest in raising monthly benefits or offering other kinds of financial supports to families in poverty. So a lot of states, some states give financial benefits and some states just give vouchers for things. It becomes whatever the state would like to do. In the South, they are very, very stringent on requirements and they're less likely to give you cash. Okay, here's a poll. Do you feel that TANF is justice? Are you guys sharing the poll? There you go. Can you see it? Let me move it. Can you guys see the poll? Okay. Yes, okay. So you guys, do you think TANF is justice? Yes or no? The results aren't showing, I know. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, I can also even, I'm not supposed to be able to, that's okay. You guys can put it in the chat or you can, oh, okay, there it is. It says no, 89%. Okay, we got it there. All right, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Yeah, okay, yeah, so things aren't looking so good right now with TANF, but it's not all hopeless. All right. TANF and student parents intersectionality. And before I'm going to kind of just talk about student parents and things. Intersectionality was a prism to bring to light dynamics within discrimination law that wasn't appreciated by the courts. And of course, it's by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. I'll give you an example of what intersection was. There was a Black woman who did not get a job at this organization. And the judge, and the thing is, the organization, the administrative staff were all women, but they were all white. And the maintenance staff was all Black, but they were all men. So when she took it to court to say, I'm not giving this benefit because of, I'm not giving this benefit, it's viewed as, the judge was like, but they're hiring Black people and they're hiring women. So it was kind of like there was no framework. There was no framework in order to support women of color, Black, Puerto Rican, Latinx women in regards to various issues that they were facing. So that's kind of like the intersectionality. And I think that probably a lot of women here and parents here probably face that. Although college students can receive TANF or welfare, their participation in higher ed is limited by strict work requirements. For example, the state of Washington requires TANF recipients to take part in a workforce activity for up to 30 hours a week if they want to keep getting TANF as a college student. Although many states, counties, and welfare offices or case managers offer TANF participants educational options, very few clients actually took advantage of these offerings. It is not known how many participants have enrolled in baccalaureate programs such as TANF's implementation because the federal government has not tracked this particular category of education. Charter reports show that in 2005, 2004, only 5.1% of TANF participants were enrolled in education programs. And that 20% of those participants were enrolled in secondary, not post-secondary like college. Researchers know, however, that the number of welfare participants attending college has dwindled precipitously the last 12 years. The City University of New York reported that before welfare reforms in 1995, more than 27,000 welfare participants were enrolled in college in similar programs. And in 2016, the participants, the enrollment had dropped by 81% to only 5,000. And that number is National Urban League for Opportunity and Equity, Equality. Other states have reported similar drops in the number of welfare participants participating in post-secondary degrees. See the Center for Women Policy Studies if you want that. Again, all of these studies, I can provide them to you. Even successful TANF educational programs such as Maine's Parent Scholar Program, which allows TANF eligible students to receive public assistance while pursuing a bachelor degree full-time, have frequently not served to full capacity. So does anyone want to share any experiences, if maybe in the chat or they want to unmute themselves? You're under no obligation, but just asking. Oh, they can't unmute. Okay, so you can unmute. So if you guys see anything in regards to, is there anything you guys want to share in the chat, like any experiences or anything like that? Nope, nope, nope. If keep in mind, you can always go to the Jamboard and share there. I'm very happy to read those. Very happy to read those. How TANF helps. Its strengths include, it provides a measure of access to TANF benefits that consistently over time and across states, and uses a readily available data, making it transparent and relatively current. There's a high number of higher ed TANF support schools on this. Okay, thank you. It is important to understand that while significant changes in TANF work programs could improve recipients' employment prospects, they cannot undo the employment discrimination and structural racism and reduce those prospects. Issues like COVID-19 has laid bare and exacerbated TANF recipients face a labor market rife with disparities that limit their ability to find work and to get paid enough to lift their families out of poverty. Black and Latina women who make up a majority of adult TANF recipients experience a dual burden of racial and gender disparities in the labor market. That's taught intersectionality. They are paid less than white women or men, despite being more likely to be the family's primary breadwinner. They also face longer stints of joblessness than their white counterparts. Other factors such as education, age, health and disability issues, and lack of access to transportation and childcare further limits TANF recipients' labor market prospects. So mental health, physical health, and housing. Of course, if you have a lack of work or the work that you get pays you very small amount, these significant health challenges limit many TANF recipients in employment opportunities. And as you see, we keep talking about, job, job, job. And we're not really talking about like education, because it's kind of like you're in this kind of like this trap where you have to get a job, but in order to get a good job, you have to get an education, but there are all these different requirements. So parents leaving TANF report that lack of access to transportation and childcare hinders their abilities to find high quality employment. TANF recipients also report physical and health disabilities at a higher rate than the general population, both of which significantly limit their employment prospects. For example, 46% of people who left TANF in the Washington study screened positive for mental health they needed mental health, had mental health challenges. 19% screened positive for needing treatment for substance abuse, and 60% screened positive for needing who had probable or chronic health conditions. Now, the thing is this, is that now we're going to go into the funding mechanism, okay? Block funding versus entitlement funding. Block grants are a conservative innovation to get around federal requirements. Well, they have been. Requirements like civil rights for all, being concerned for vulnerable citizens. Block grants allow the federal government to abdicate a lot of social responsibility. The fig leaf used to cover themselves and say, like, we should do block grants instead of entitlement funding is the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment, the power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by states or reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The problem with block grants is that the funding levels tend to fall short of financial need. The consequence is that the programs face benefit cuts, eligibility restrictions, or waiting lists. Funding levels are often inadequate initially and typically erode over time. This is from the Center for Budget Priorities, which gives a lot of great information. Aids to families with dependent children is a great example of how the federal government was, kind of program, a great federal government program was destroyed through a block grant. TANF turned AFDC into a block grant. And since then, like I said, the benefits have dropped. It helps fewer families. Like before 1996, it helped 2/3 of eligible families. And now in 2000, it's not just 2021, but in 2019, it was just helping 1/4 of the families that were eligible. So let me give you an example of how block grants work for entitlement grants. And keep in mind, these are legal terms. When we think about entitlement, a lot of times we have this kind of like negative, like, oh, entitlement, like you're just getting stuff for free. That's a legal term. People were kind of tricked into thinking entitlement means a bad thing. And it's really not. It's just a funding term. It means if you need the money, you get it. So I'm going to give an example. Say, with small numbers, for a block grant, say you need lunch. Say lunch is $6. Okay, lunch is $6. With a block grant, you get $5. Okay. Then something like COVID happens and lunch goes up to $10. Well, you still get $5. You figure it out, not our problem. Entitlement funding is, oh, lunch is $6, here's $6. Oh, we have COVID, lunch is now $10, here's $10. So that is the difference between block funding and entitlement grants. And in order to get block funding to work, you have to add paperwork, add requirements, figure out ways to get people off the program. So a lot of times, a lot of us in college, in higher ed, we're trying to support people, we're trying to support parents. And what is happening is they're like, well, is there going to be some kind of trick? Are you going to try to throw me off because I didn't meet this requirement? And that's a totally reasonable thing, because that's exactly what block grants do. They do try to figure out ways to get you off the program because they don't have enough money. So in order to make it so that they can actually benefit everybody, they have to figure out weird, bizarre ways to throw you off the program that have no necessarily rhyme or reason. Just, we don't have the money, we need to cut people, even though you might actually need that money. Universal versus means-based testing. Universal is, like I said, universal is a legal definition. It means everyone, not means tested. Means tested is a legal term that means you have to fit under a particular criteria. So that means, like public school, that is a universal program. Regardless of who you are, you can be part of it. You don't have to fill out like a lot of paperwork because it's guaranteed. Number one, it's entitlement funding, which means it's guaranteed funding, and it is universal, which means everyone can access it. So it becomes a thing that people, it becomes a less torturous process. So let's see here. So returning to the means tested safety net, it's problematic for many reasons. And I always like to use the Beveridge report by Sir William Beveridge. He wrote in the 1940s. Its mantra was to abolish want. According to that report, means tested safety net is problematic for the following reasons. One, it has a stigma. It's for poor people only. So everyone knows you're poor if you're using it. In the US, being poor is awful. It's an awful thing, and it's moralized. People don't think, oh, this is because of systematic racism or because of systematic sexism. They just think, well, you didn't work hard. That's why you're poor. So, you really shouldn't be even getting that anyway. And so if you need that, you think that you have failed in some way. It lacks broad political support. Since everyone isn't getting it and they're not getting the same amount, it can become a partisan issue. Like, why should I give this person money? I'm not getting it. Why should I give it to you? You can use it as a political bargaining chip because everyone's not getting it. So they're just like, why should I care? It's tough to access. By the time you get assistance, you're so far down the economic rabbit hole. It's just really bad. It has high administrative costs, which means paperwork after paperwork. Did you do this? Did you do that? So they're checking this, they're checking that. It's a poverty trap. It's hard to get and it's hard to keep. So instead of encouraging those receiving support to produce art or work on hobbies or look for different jobs or even take risk, it discourages living of any kind or any outward form of joy. Recipients are essentially trapped in soul-crushing poverty owing to a lack of choices. That's not everybody, but this is the challenge with means-based testing is supposed to universal. And I think the thing is that a lot of times we think, well, that's the only options that we have. You have to have these kind of criteria in order to have a program. And actually, no, you don't necessarily have to have things set up in that way in order for you to have a program that supports people. Okay. Federal versus state. Well, this is pretty simple. Things that are run by the federal government is kind of like this. If something is run by the feds, it becomes less partisan. Like, say you're in Florida and you need TANF, well, you might get less money than someone who's in California, and someone in California might get, so it becomes state rights. And I don't know if you know how state rights is a buzz term. So state rights, kind of like workers' rights, states' rights, et cetera, it tends to oppress people. So when you have things that are not national and you have things that are more state-oriented, it becomes more partisan. It becomes more an opinion of someone else. Like, I don't know if people who have 3 children should be able to get this or get this extra benefit. I'm going to add this requirement on. I'm going to add this paperwork on. I'm going to add this. But if it's a state program, a national program, that's less likely to happen. Of course, in places like California or maybe New York, you might get more benefits, but in places where, like in the South, you're going to get a lot less benefits. And it's going to be a lot harder, and it's going to be harder for you to advocate for yourself because you have to advocate state by state by state. It's kind of like we can use the marijuana laws. It might be legal by the state, but it's illegal according to the feds. So the feds, the feds can decide, oh, well, we're going to arrest you. But if it was legal by the feds and not legal by the state, you'd have to go by the federal guidelines. Okay, we're gonna go to solutions because, the thing is this, is that, solutions work. Solutions, there are things, I mean, like I said, in regards to our NWRO, look at what their advocacy did. I am part of the campus program, which is it's a great program. It helps parenting students who have children. So you come, you get free childcare, and you get supported and all these kinds of things. And it's really not that much paperwork. It's it's a great program. And it's as we see in regards to our student, in regards to parenting parents, one of the problems in regards to work and education was childcare. So that takes a great burden off of people. Another solution are universal college, universal basic income. But you know what? I want you guys to think of some ideas and share them with each other. So we're going to go back to the Jamboard. Okay, let's go here. Oops. So we're going to share that link again. Go to the second one. I think Jessica's going to share it. Maybe I'll share it here in the chat. There you go. Look at that. I'm a multitasker. So go to the Jamboard and think of some solutions that can make TANF more equitable in your mind, because I'm sure you guys have been thinking things. What can make welfare? What can make things more equitable for parenting students? Can you give direction? Oh, yes, I sure can. Here you go. So you take this right here, go to the fourth, and then you put in solutions, and then less paperwork. And then LARC, and then you hit save. There you go. And cancel. There you go. So you see that? You go to the fourth one, you click on it, you write, and then you save it. So give me, yes, I do. I feel that TANF should include non-citizens, undocumented students. I think anybody who needs it should get it. And I really do think that. And I think, and we have the money to do it. So remember the fourth dot right here, sticky note, and then you you can, oops, that's not right. Sticky note, and then you could change the color to universal college. Save. I might have to steal some of your ideas. Lifetime limit, yes. Since we see different workers, exactly, you do. You see different, I'm sorry, I'm like talking. It's so weird because I'm so used to students being able to talk, not students, but people, me being able to interact with people. So I'm kind of sad. Yeah, it is. The rule, people do interpret the rules differently. Remove, yes. Remember, you click on this fourth one, you write, and then you save it. Okay. Oh, I'm loving. Like I said, this is mine now. No, I was kidding. Put your name on it or it's mine. Okay. Flexibility, graduating. Yeah, exactly. This flexibility. And I'll give you 30 more seconds. Okay. 10, 9, 8, 7. All right. Okay. Casework encourage higher ed more than working. Yep. Because that was one of the problems with TANF. The people were coming out of TANF and they're not getting jobs that can support their families. They're just timed out and they're good luck. And it's like they think it's their fault, and it's not really their fault. It's the way the system's designed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm loving these answers. Okay. Keep in mind, even when I leave the screen on here, you can still put some answers on there. We can still look at them later. Mm-hmm. Exactly, Amanda. Not requiring cooperation with child support officers, some are escaping abuse. Exactly. You know, we have to look at, we have to have empathy for people and view situations and, people, we can't just view everybody the same, or we can't assume that people are trying to cheat the system, because as you know, as you see here from the history of it, it was designed with this idea that people are cheating the system, and that's not true. It's simply just propaganda so they don't have to fund it. So when we're thinking that way, it's not, we have to think that this is actively had been put into our brain. All right, so I'm going to go out of the screen. I'm going to start presenting. Keep in mind, you can keep sharing. That's fine. We can go back to that later. But thank you guys for sharing your thoughts. I appreciate that. Systematic change. How can we move it from local to federal? How do we make this an institutional change in education? Because we can talk about this all we want, but what are our plans in order to make this better? What are our plans? Okay. Creating your case. Data, op-ed, advocacies, white paper. So we're going to go to the white paper in a second. Where to get data? Peer-reviewed journals, databases, newspaper, magazine articles, and books. I cannot stress to you enough the importance of peer-reviewed journals in regards to your case. A lot of people, what they do is they say they have an idea, and maybe it's left-leaning idea or a right-wing leaning idea. And they kind of go to this kind of questionable source, and they're like, this guy who writes 3,000 word blogs with one sentence said, no one's going to listen to that. Okay. So peer-reviewed journals are journals that people have done research and other people have looked at it and go, I agree, I disagree, take that back and give me some more information, because you can't just write whatever you want. All right. So that's why peer-reviewed journals in regards to getting your sources and facts are so, so important when you're trying to build your case. And the thing is that because you're all in school, you have access to free research, which is so amazingly valuable that you can use to build your case. Databases, same thing. A lot of times it's kind of like people go, oh, everybody on welfare is cheating. Well, you can find data on that. You can be like, nope, they're not. Here you go. Here's my data that shows that that's not true. You just made that up. Or people, this is like helping people. Oh, actually, no, it's not helping people because this and this is happening. And the thing is that most of the stuff has data. You can find it, you can present it, you can put it in a paper, and then you can advocate for yourself. But also newspaper articles and magazine articles, high quality, like the New York Times, the LA Times. Of course, I'm always gonna say LA because I'm from Los Angeles. The Nation. And even to me, sometimes getting things from different political spheres, because then it shows that you're objective. You kind of get, oh, I have something from Forbes magazine, I have something from The Nation, and they're both kind of saying the same thing, but they're saying it in different ways. Books, it's another thing in regards to, there are a lot of great books on working class life, on women, etc. And they're on audio, they're audiobooks. So you don't have to even read them anymore. And I'm not saying that, and the thing is that it works the same part of your brain. Audiobooks and reading books, it's the same thing. It's not, everybody prefers different ways, but this kind of like superiority in regards to like, oh, well, I read it, so I know more. Not necessarily. It depends on how your brain works. Here is one of the ways you can, they have this thing called the op-ed project, which I love. The op-ed project mission is to change who writes the history. We are a community of thought leaders, journalists, commentary writers, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just gonna click on it. Here you go. Who writes history? A great op-ed in the New York Times, you could change policy. And people think, half of the battle is winning the narrative. The reason why they made welfare look so bad was because they got this one hook of this woman who had cheated. She had managed to she did cheat. This is like such an extreme case, such an extreme case, but they were able to shape a story and make her the symbol of everyone who was getting assistance. The welfare queen, I forgot her name, but she was, but the thing is that if you can write a story like that, you could also write a story that says, wow, if we could get help, these are all the great things that we can do. And you have the power to do that. You have the power to do that. As you see here, the op-ed, let me actually just share this in the, I'm gonna share that in, I'll share that to the attendees so you guys can have that. I would love to see some parenting students writing some op-eds, getting you inspired. Let's see here. Oh. Okay. Also too, I'm gonna go, before we go that, I wanna go how to write, what's a white paper? A white paper is a authoritative document intended to fully inform the readers on a particular topic. It combines expert knowledge or recommendations. The white paper allows a reader to understand the issue and solve the problem. And here's another link. You guys see this, right? I'm not going to go into that because we're running a little bit short on time, and I go a little crazy. Here you go. Sorry about using that ableist term. I get very enthusiastic, but check that out. And the thing is that anybody can write a white paper. Anybody can write a white paper. Don't think that, oh, well, I don't have a PhD, et cetera, et cetera. You know what? Whoever you are, you can write a white paper and you can get a friend. All right. You can get a friend and they'll can do it with you. And there you go. There you go. So there you go. Okay. All right. Another thing, present. Joining organizations. Starting your own 501(c). Now, I know a lot of people kind of go, oh, I want to start a 501(c). And those aren't bad. But they can't do political things. You know, you can't really make political change, and you can't really educate people on, you can, but you can't. But 501(c), organizations like, organizations like Acorn, they're registering people to vote, educate people on policy, amplifying issues to politicians. The reason why Acorn was so polarizing to people was because it was doing for poor people what people with money have. People with money have lobbyists, like, oh, I want to make, I don't want medicine, I want to charge as much as I want to for this medicine that I created. Like, I created this, this cream for people, and now I want to charge a lot of money. And it's kind of like, I'm going to lobby, I'm going to build my case, I'm going to go to politicians, and I'm going to tell them that, in order to save the economy, this medicine needs to cost a whole bunch of money. Well, people who are poor or working class, we don't have that. We have a lot of 501(c) groups, but we don't have a lot of 501(c) groups, which means we don't have anybody advocating. We don't have anyone creating the story. We don't have anyone creating the narrative. And it might seem like, oh, if somebody's just writing a story, that's nothing. You don't really need money for that. Actually, that is the most important job. Without the story, without the narrative, your story is not going anywhere. It really is not. Or you can join another organization. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to start your own, but think about that. Start a lobbying group. Don't limit yourself to, we kind of steer parenting students, women, people of color to certain fields and to certain parts of politics, when you could be doing all kinds of things that don't cost that much money to do, that would take you the same amount of time that you take in doing your advocacy work now, and be very effective, because there are very few people doing those. So read books on organizing. There are a lot of books that are on organizing. Again, if you want my information, I can send you books on how to organize. Follow the leads of successful organizations. Go, you know what? This organization, they did a really great job. Wouldn't it be great if we use their blueprint in order to do something for parenting students who are in TANF? You have so much power to do so many wonderful things, and I just, I hope that I gave you some ideas and I gave you some thoughts on what you can do and how you can do it. Contact your U.S. rep. While of course it's good to go with a group, I'll tell you a quick little story because I want to be able to answer your questions if you have any. Where I live, they were doing things in regards to beautifying the property, beautifying, putting trees, et cetera, et cetera. But there was no one from my neighborhood. Okay, so I went to a meeting and I said, hey, where I live, you're not doing anything. And the guy who was in charge, he just took out his notepad and just wrote it down. He was like, what? He just took out his notepad and wrote it down. And then my neighborhood got put on the list. So a lot of times people think, wow, it's really complicated to change things. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you just get lucky and you just at the right place at the right time, showing up where your politician is. Oh, I wanted to do a cause. Oh, I really like to do something for parenting students, et cetera, et cetera. And they might just go, oh, well, I'm going to take up this cause. There you go. So I'm going to leave you with this quote. For me, women's liberation is simple. No woman in this country can feel dignified. No woman can be liberated until all women get off their knees, all women standing together on your feet. Johnny Tillman. Woo! Like I said, look her up. She's amazing. I'm amazed that we don't know who she is. The Poor People March, et cetera, are all inspired by things that Miss Johnny Tillman did. So amazing. So with that, questions and comments for me. Let me actually get this screen. You know what, I'm gonna do this here. See, thank you. I'm gonna go back to questions and comments. I just want to put right here because I want to be able to show my face for a second. Lark Love, LLO@bergen.edu. Okay, here, stop sharing. All right. So questions and answers. No questions. Okay. Nothing. That's okay. That's fine. But also too, let me go over here. I'm gonna actually go over here and see if anybody put any other questions on the Jamboard. Had any questions for me? Looking for it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Because I want to give people time to ask questions and things, but so feel free if you have any questions or anything like that. No. Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I thank you guys all for attending this workshop / training / Lark talking and talking. I hope that you guys learned some things that you hadn't learned before. And I hope, if your comment did not go through, somebody's asking me a question through another. I don't know why. Somebody said they asked the comment. You can put in the comments if you can, but I don't see your question. You can ask me here if you're asking me. Let's see here. Nope. So I would like to, with that, if you have any questions that you would like to ask me later at a different time, I'm putting my email in there, and LLO@bergen.edu, and I would be very, very happy to give you any of the resources that you references that I made in my presentation or anything like that. So with that, I guess we will we'll wrap up. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Andrea, my captioner, who did an amazing job of doing the, messaging and all that stuff. So that will be it. The closing sessions at 2:20, and thank you so much. Thank you, Sally. Thank you. Okay.